in to the Gaming Discourse. I am Tyler Frater alongside Richard De La Cruz.
Take two.
And Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Richard, they never would have known.
It is Monday, July 17th, 2023. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse, where we post videos. Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse, so you can support us for $2, $4, $7, and $10 and get early access to videos, access to our Discord server, more stuff like that. Currently working on the part 2 of my Splinter Cell retrospective. Part 1 was a long time ago.
It was very good.
Thank you.
It was a very good video. Part
2, I thought was going to cover the rest of the games, but then I played one of the 7th gen, 6th gen, the Xbox version of Double Agent, and I was like, holy crap, this is completely different. And then today I started Double Agent for the 360, and I was like, well, this is like 2 different games. And then I finished Essentials, and Essentials was its own weird Frankenstein of a game. So go ahead.
No, how did you? I mean, I guess you'll talk about it, but man, I'm curious how you felt about like the controls and everything, since there's no like.
Oh, it's really strange. It plays okay. The game's not difficult. There aren't a lot of like challenge. Well, I don't know. If I was really trying to ghost through every level, it'd be really difficult. Mm-hmm. It's also, I played through a. You have my PSP at your store, and you have my PSP copies of Essentials at your store.
Yeah, of course.
So I played an emulated version, which is legal.
Yeah.
So it's not the official version. So there are things about it that I'm not sure. It's like, okay, is this just emulated jank, or is this how the game actually was? I went back and looked at some reviews. Reviews were not glowing for Essentials, and some reviewers even mentioned that the game felt broken, and there are definitely parts what I played that felt broken. So Essentials was weird, and it felt like a hack job, sort of a rushed hack job where they just threw some things together. It's really why I said Frankenstein's monster is because there are chaos theory levels redone in Essentials, but Essentials does not take the visuals and the UI and everything from Essentials are from like Pandora Tomorrow, and so is the audio and everything. So it is partially a remake of Chaos Theory levels done through Pandora Tomorrow's tech, which makes it really surreal. And some of the levels are like condensed. So there's a level where you're on an oil rig from the first game, and instead of playing through the entire level, there are like 4 sections that are cut out. Oh, I see. And those are the sections of the oil rig level that you play. Really weird. And there are things that don't totally make sense. Like in the oil rig level in the first Splinter Cell, I believe you have to get to a boat to escape. So basically the oil rig is going to be destroyed. You have like a few minutes to escape. Once you get to a boat, the level ends, right? So it's like, okay, you got to the boat. That's representative of you won. In Essentials, you just have to talk to a guy. Or what was it? I think you just have to talk to a guy and then pick up his briefcase, and that ends the mission, which is really strange. You don't actually have to get to like the boat at the end. So Essentials kind of felt, it did feel like it was sort of a rushed hatchet job. That's not hack job. Hatchet job is what I was looking for. Hatchet job where they slammed things together. There are 2 actors that play Lambert. One of the first, I'm pretty sure there's 2. One of them is the same guy who plays Lambert in the first Splinter Cell and then Chaos Theory and Double Agent. The second actor that plays Lambert appears in Pandora Tomorrow, and this is the actor who was from the guy in the Allstate commercials.
Oh yes,
that guy. Mm-hmm. Not the chaos guy. Or
I know who you're talking about.
He's got a really deep voice, almost like a...
He plays the president in 27 or 24.
Dennis Haysbert.
Yeah, and he has a very like Lance Reddick almost type voice, really deep. So he plays he is Lambert in Pandora Tomorrow, right? So there's this really weird thing where you will go into a level, and because Chaos Theory didn't have it didn't have alarm states in the way that Pandora Tomorrow had. In Pandora Tomorrow, you have alarm states. You shoot a guy, somebody sees it, they do an alarm, and you'll hear over the intercom or a radio, alarm stage 1, flak jackets on, and then Lambert's like, Fisher, you're paid to be invisible, right? Okay, so that's from Pandora Tomorrow. That doesn't happen in Chaos Theory. So it's really weird because you'll enter a level with a line from Lambert, and then you'll trigger an alarm, and the Lambert you'll hear over radio is just the audio from Pandora Tomorrow. So in the course of one level, you hear from both Lamberts, which is really strange. There's also there's a character named Redding who is like an assistant analyst who tells you things every now and then. There is one line in Essentials that that you can tell they needed to communicate something to the player because there's these cameras in a level. In Chaos Theory, you use Sam's knife, you cut the cables, you disable the cameras, right? Well, in this one, because you don't have a knife in Essentials because it's closer to Pandora Tomorrow, and Sam didn't have a knife in Pandora Tomorrow, although he does in Essentials, but he doesn't use it. It's weird. You don't cut the cameras. You go to a security room and you disable the cameras on a computer, right?
Okay.
So when you go in there and disable the cameras, the developers must have decided we need a line to communicate to the player that you're doing the correct thing to disable the cameras in here. So Redding talks to you. It's a totally different voice actor for this one line of Redding. You could tell they're like, okay, we just need one guy for Redding. We're not going to get this guy who played Redding because we just need one sentence.
Yeah.
So they're like, who are you? I work at QA. Okay, we need you to read this sentence. Go to this mic over here. We're gonna set up a mic in the side room, and it's like, so it's there's stuff like that. It's really strange. Unless you're like and then there's other things you can't in Essentials. You have to kill Lambert. There's no way around killing Lambert. You have to kill him, which I really dislike because I don't think that makes sense. Because at that point in Sam's life, he has never been...
Oh, right. This was the choice from Double Agent.
From Double Agent. That choice in Sam has always... I think there's a consistent characterization where Sam dislikes the positions that he's put in, and he will disobey orders based on his own moral code. And I think if you do certain things in the game, you can draw a straight line and see what that moral code is. So in Double Agent, it never made sense to me that Sam would shoot Lambert, because at that point, Sam's cover is almost blown. It's at the end of the game. Things are kind of unraveling. So it's like, why not just shoot the guy that wants you to kill Lambert and then just take out the terrorist cell at that point? Sam's never been one that's always followed rules. So it just doesn't make sense that Sam would be like, okay, I'll protect my cover for another month and shoot Lambert. But in Essentials, you have to kill Lambert, and it's not anywhere near as like dramatic. You're just in like a office, just like some conference room. In Double Agent, at least it's in like a dank cellar and it's first person and intense and stuff like that. But in Double Agent, you just walk into a conference room and you don't know if you're doing a quarterly earnings report or if you're about to shoot a guy in the face.
Or both.
Yeah, or both. So yeah, that was it. So, okay, anyway, I wanted to talk more about Pillars 2. That's what I would... Don't ever say a game's name when I'm trying to...
I literally asked a follow-up question. I could ask irrelevant follow-up questions.
I apologize. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. That's how my brain works. My brain is that episode of SpongeBob where they're all going crazy looking through file cabinets. Okay, so in Pillars of Eternity, the first one, you have to rest to regain your spells, a la Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like Baldur's Gate, which is based on Dungeons and Dragons, or which is Dungeons and Dragons. So you have to rest. To rest, you have to use camping equipment, which there's a finite amount. You can only carry like 5 at a time, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So when you go into a dungeon, you have a limited resource of time, a limited number of times you can rest, before you have to buy more of these things, right? Which means you can't just rest all the time. You have to be careful with it, which means you have to be careful with how you use your spells. In Pillars 2, almost there are a few spells that only replenish after a rest, but basically all the important spells that you're going to use in combat, like for the most part, they come back per encounter. So you fight a group of enemies, you beat them, you win. Right as soon as you're done with combat, those spells come back. So it's not as tactical. You don't have to think to yourself, is this fight a big enough deal where I need to blow this spell right now and not have it later, or I have to rest to get it back? Mm-hmm. You don't have to think about that as much, which makes the game definitely a little bit easier. And with it has worked with 5 people, but I do miss having 6 people because I don't know. I feel there are so many classes, like there are other classes that I wish I could incorporate. Mm-hmm. So like I have one of my characters is I think she's a ranger. She's a ranger mage dual class, which is cool because she can cast spells, and then she has a companion animal that she can order around to do things. And so she's a little bit versatile, but if I include her in my group, she's a frontline fighter, which is kind of weird. It seems like she's made more as like a ranged fighter, hence because she's shooting guns and sending her bird to attack people and stuff like that. So if I had 6 people, I could have a third frontline fighter. There's another character that's a cleric, and clerics are frontline fighters because they do healing and stuff. So that'd be perfect because I have a tank, a monk type character, I forget what they're called, and a cleric right now, which is a great front line. And then I'm a priest, and I have a mage. So the mage is a little more DPS. Priest is support class. And that's another thing in Pillars 2 is there's much less of an emphasis on spells that give your parties debuffs or negative side effects. So in the first Pillars, they're like a bunch of different monsters have specific spells. They would scare your party, and then your party would run away. They would stun your party. They would paralyze your party, something like that, right? So you had to learn which monsters and which enemies cast which specific spells. And then as the priest leveled up, when I played as my priest, I would unlock spells that would negate those specific afflictions, right? Mm-hmm. So like when I'm 30 hours into Pillars of Eternity, the first one I learned, okay, so dragons scare or paralyze my party. So right at the beginning of a fight with a dragon, I'll cast the spell that makes my party immune to paralyze, and then I just took away one of the dragon's most powerful abilities, right? Okay. In Pillars 2, there's much less of an emphasis on that. Enemies don't really cast like big AoE party-wide affecting AoEs. It's much more just like mages that cast direct attack spells to like 1 or 2 people. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I'm enjoying it. I like it. It feels like they had a few ideas to do a different game, and they made a good game, but it doesn't really like totally itch that real intense like RPG experience that Pillars was, and just executed on so many levels. But still enjoying it, and the writing is just, oh my god, the writing is just so good. Because your character convenes and talks with gods. So these gods, the way they speak, the way they appear before you, I'm trying to think of like an example. It's awesome, and you can taunt the gods. You can say, "Hey, screw you," or you can, because you may worship them, so you can sort of like bow before them or speak nice to them or whatever. But the voice acting is so awesome, and when you do encounter them, they really nail the sense that you're on like some grand scale, that you're speaking with like primordial existence, which is cool, and that their motives are mysterious. And and there are certain things about the gods that the first Pillars of Eternity reveals that makes them specifically interesting as compared to like other gods and other fantasy universes. But yeah, so that's it. So that's all I want to talk about. And Richard, why don't you?
I've been playing some more. I got back into Honkai Star Rail because there was a new character that got released this month, and he's part of it's called the Abundance class, and so there's classes like tank, healer, and stuff like that. But they give them new names. But there's like the Preservation is focused on creating shields and raising team's defense. And there's like the Destruction and supposed to focused on DPS and character survivability. Erudition is area effect damage, but he's Abundance, and so his focus is healing. And I really wanted him because I have a healer, and she does great, but his healing is fully based on how much attack he does. His attack, the higher his attack stat, the more healing he does. And in turn, also the more attack he does, obviously. But his healing is also passive. So you don't even have to like target anybody to heal. His skill is, when you use his skill, secondary attack, you'll get 2 charges. And if anybody goes below 50%, he automatically just heals them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so really neat passive thing. So I decided that I really wanted him on my team, so I grabbed him, and it was really nice to build them up. And with him, I was able to pass something that I've been stuck on for probably the last month and a half, which is why I've kind of pulled back on playing it because, I hit that kind of like, I had to like climb, I had to work to climb over the hill to get to it. So now I'm like, yeah, we're going again. So let's get going. And so I did that. So I was playing that a little bit, and that's what I accomplished in Honkai Star Rail. And then I played Final Fantasy a bit more. I think PlayStation tells me before you play the game, it tells you how far you're into the game. Mm-hmm. Like on the right side, it'll give you a percentage, and I think I'm in the 70% area. But
okay.
There's still a couple things that have kind of like come up that I would say I'm disappointed in. Considering the team that made this game, because this is the Final Fantasy 14 team who has spearheaded like one of the greatest like MMO comebacks in history and has like a very, very good grasp on the game that they're running right now. And so Final Fantasy 16, I'm still very bothered by the amount of gear that is non-existent in this game. So you have a gear system, you can equip body, legs, belts, whatever, but you never need to. And it's kind of this, it's just too. Around. And there have been times where I've refined stuff to get better weapons, but when I'm out and about in the overworld, you don't really find anything. Stores don't really have anything. And it's all based on killing higher level monsters, getting like whatever they drop, and then refining it or crafting it at the blacksmith, in that instance, he doesn't really have much either. I think throughout the entire game so far, I've only changed my weapon 4 times.
Okay.
And that's around like 25, 30 hours. And I mean, that seems okay, but I mean, in Final Fantasy 7, you're finding, not the remake, but the original 7, you're finding weapons all over the place. Diablo's another example. I know they're separate genres, but
sure. Yeah.
Diablo, you're finding stuff. Horizon Zero Dawn, you're finding stuff all over the place, that you can use. So
yeah, and I think
it's just a little weird. It's a little awkward.
I think games come in. I think a game, if you're not getting a lot of loot, then it's meaningful loot. Because that's how like Baldur's Gate, that's how RPGs are.
Yes.
You also have a party, so you're finding loot for multiple characters, but like when you find something that is good for one of your characters, it's something that's really good.
Yeah, it's going to stick there.
But you don't find a ton of like okay items that you're just going to get rid of. So that's what makes that exciting. And then there's the Diablo, where it's a looter shooter where you're constantly finding stuff that you can break down and build.
Slasher stasher.
There you go. I love that. That's great.
That's good. Did you come up with that?
I think I've heard it before, but I may have heard a variation of it.
Okay, that's a good one.
That is very good.
But I understand.
Yeah.
I haven't played Final Fantasy 16. I won't. I'm not interested in it.
That brought me to the I guess, realization, or the kind of, I have to pull myself back and think, okay, like, I understand what they're doing. Because they need Final Fantasy to sell, they need to do something with it. And so they've turned it into an action hack and slash series, which is fine. But I have to continue to think that this is just simply now a hack and slash series.
Would it not? Do you not think it would have been as successful had it been a more traditional, some kind of RPG, even if it's like an action RPG?
No, I think it would have been just as successful.
Do you have any insight into why they went hack and slash route? I'm sure they have reasons. I'm sure there's like, the developers have talked about why they went this direction.
I don't know. I think it's something they're psyching themselves into. JRPGs have statistically not sold very well ever. And I think something that began to change, particularly off the top of my head, was Persona 5. Persona 5 ended up selling 8 million, or like, I think, which is very good for a Japanese RPG, that style of game. But Final Fantasy, a staple in gaming history, doesn't, bring in numbers like Square Enix feels they should, but we know how Square Enix thinks.
Sure.
So I think they're just kind of psyching themselves into something here.
Oh, okay, that's too bad.
And so they think, hey, we need to keep changing with the times, et cetera. And so people, when you watch people on Twitch, they're playing crazy games. They're playing hack and slash games. They're playing games that are very fast, very,
Yep.
So that could be it. But beyond that, I noticed there's no other races in the game in Final Fantasy 16.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Every Final Fantasy has had, obviously, a large majority of are humans, but there's like the I forgot their race name, but there's like the short little characters. There's usually elves. There's usually Viera. There's at least some semblance,
like a monkey
of
type character in 7 or something, like a cat monkey thing.
Oh yeah, there is the Red 13. He was an experiment. So,
okay.
And then there's Kate Sith, who's like a robot and whatnot. But I guess from a high fantasy game, you probably would expect at least elves or something that, pointy ears and whatnot. But so far, I haven't seen any. So
interesting.
I do find that weird, especially coming from, once again, the Final Fantasy 14 team.
I wonder if they. I
think they were going for a certain vibe. They didn't do it maliciously or anything, but they were going,
grounded, quote unquote.
Right.
Game of Thronesian type thing, where there's other races in Game of Thrones, but for the large chunk of the story is
they're going to deal with
humans.
That stuff. And then I ended up fighting Titan, one of the icons, and I felt that fight was a bit boring. And I think it's mostly because of the way they structured the fight. Titan is known as a character who is very big, usually made of rock, and he's a Titan. He's huge, at least comparable to other characters.
We saw him in the demo. I think.
You see him in the demo. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And so when you fight him, the juxtaposition is weird from being Ifrit, being this character who in the Final Fantasy universe is usually seen as one of the most powerful, like, guardian forces, fighting Titan, and you're hitting Titan, and it's like these numbers are popping up, like 100,000, 200,000, whatever, and then the bar is just like, it's annoying for me is what it is, because it's you're fluffing the time on what I have to do.
Okay.
And then when it happens, it's, the cinematics are very, very, very good, and they're very entertaining, but you're watching them and it's like, I got to press that button. Whoops. Like, because they do that like cinematic thing, which is, I don't believe really needs to be there, because it's just to like keep you engaged. So it is kind of distracting. And when you get to a second form, he kind of gets even bigger than what he is. And so they have to account for like the mass of this guy who's bigger than mountains. And as he takes a swing at you, because they have to, his size and everything, it's just like
It's really slow.
You know? So,
Yeah.
right, which it would be, you know, generally, but you're just kind of waiting there and you're just like, okay, all right, dodge, you know? And it was just a fight that was a bit boring because of, I guess, the padding that they had to do for it. And there's like 3 phases, and they're all essentially the same. Like just hack it, you know, just hack at him until his bar goes down, and then, you know, he of course gets stunned, and then you do more damage, and then the bar fills right back up. Do it again. The story is still continuing to be very, very good, and something probably the main thing that is pushing me towards the game, and the gameplay. The gameplay is very, very good as well. It's just there are supplemental things that I don't think work with it as well as I want them to, or I would like them to. And that's not a problem for everybody. Obviously, it's getting good reviews, but those are just some things that are dampening my experience just a tiny bit. I still like it a lot, but I don't think it's going to be on like my short list for Game of the Year this year.
Okay. Connor?
Started playing a little bit of Diablo 4.
Hey.
Started off with the Barbarian, just tooling around, seeing how that felt. Then I went back and played with Necromancer, and you know what? That's a fun class. Sit back, do nothing. Love it. me and the bony boys. Just
me and the boys. Yeah.
Drastically changed how I played the game because I was, as a barbarian, I was like paying attention to fight for the most part. But Necromancer, checking my phone in one hand, just tapping X in the other, occasionally tapping triangle.
I'll tell you what, the thing that kept popping into my head when I play with Necromancers is, it's also a night that skeletons came to life. That's a little Tim Robinson reference there for you. Anyway, sorry, continue your thoughts on.
I haven't gone far enough into the game to actually start to fully flesh out how I feel about the game. I like Lilith's design. Of course, Blizzard cinematics, amazing.
Yeah.
That first one with the 4 adventurers going into the chamber, beautiful. Loved every second of that.
Yes, yep. Great opening cutscene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then other than that, been playing replaying a little bit of Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh wow! Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Been thinking about that game recently.
Never stops being.
Yeah,
that in Red Dead
combat.
2, I could always go back to.
They nailed the combat in Ghost of Tsushima.
It feels so good.
Yep, and the game. It also doesn't hurt that the game is just beyond gorgeous.
Yeah, someone posted a Twitter video 2 days ago. Somebody did the whole "it's just Assassin's Creed again," and yeah, someone's like, well, I'm going to show you this video and shut up. And it was just a very beautifully cut action sequence fight in Ghost of Tsushima. And
I don't know.
It doesn't even need the action sequence.
We've had this discussion.
Right before the title pops up when you're on the back of your horse and you ride into the field.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful.
And I think we've had this discussion. I don't know. If you want to have a discussion about Ghost, I think you have to talk, and this is the same for Horizon. Specifically, the first Horizon Zero Dawn is very similar to Far Cry, right? You kill the robot animals, you get their parts, and then you have to have so many parts to upgrade your quiver or whatever. Straight out of Far Cry's rulebook. Is formulaic, is stealing certain gameplay, not stealing, but stealing certain gameplay moves from other games. Is that bad? It all depends on the context. But Horizon and Ghost do other things that make that so if I don't know, that's just a reductive Twitter argument. It's just Assassin's Creed. No, stop it. Because it's just I don't know, it's somebody who I remember people making that argument about Red Dead Redemption. It's GTA with horses. Imagine people saying that today. It's GTA with horses. You'd get canceled. you'd get like bombs sent to your house or something. Right?
I do say that to people at work though, because unfortunately it's the fastest thing to make their brain go.
Yes,
oh,
but you're not making a reductive argument.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
You're not making that argument because for some reason you don't like Red Dead or you want to poo-poo someone's excitement.
I make reductive arguments when I make fun of the 64. The console fucking sucked.
Nintendo deserves it.
Okay, are we? I have the coughs apparently. Are we? I've got pneumonia. I'm gonna die like Arthur Morgan.
Tuberculosis.
That's tuberculosis. Yeah, sorry. Connor, are you gonna say something?
I
got the black lung pop. I just got it.
got that.
You've been working in the mines for 2 days.
Never shy away from a Zoolander reference.
Oh man, what is this? A center for ants? Okay, sorry. Yeah, Connor, go ahead.
I've got nothing else.
Okay, let's hit the end. Thanks for listening. If you like our content, please consider subscribing or leaving a like and comment. You can find us at patreon.com/thegamingdiscourse. And our tiers are $2, $4, $7, and $10 and include getting your name in the video credits, early access, and access to our Discord server.
Good news, everyone.
Hey, is it?
Is it? Time will tell.
News, everyone.
Xbox. There we go. Has possibly won their trial.
Pack it up, Sony. Xbox One.
And they are now free to own Activision Blizzard if they get past the CMA hearings and some other things. So let's go with the recap. The FTC was denied an injunction to stop the deal before it started due to their very, very, very poor performance in the court.
Yes.
Earlier today, Bloomberg reported that Microsoft and Activision are unlikely to reach a deal by tomorrow's deadline, but that the CMA is willing to open negotiations specifically over cloud gaming, and those will start in August. So the deal is on pause, still for a little bit.
If they didn't, sorry to cut you off in the middle of notes. If they didn't reach a deal today, Microsoft was supposed to give Blizzard like a $3 billion fee or something like that.
Right? Yeah.
Because the deal would have fallen through. I think it's like an insurance type thing. But from what I've read, stuff is breaking, so I don't know. But from what I'm reading, it sounds like... Well, here, read the next quote. I'm sorry. I hit your laptop. I do that all the time. You need to just sit like on the other side of the room. I need the entire half of this room for my arms. Perfect.
Luis Woodridge, research manager for Ampere Analysis, told GameIndustry.biz that pushing the July 18th deadline back would be a minor hurdle, saying, quote, "The deal is likely to close following modifications that will appease the CMA, and once closed, it will be much more difficult for the FTC to oppose it. So really, it's a race against time for both parties."
Yeah, and there you go. So, okay, I'm not totally surprised by this. I didn't think I don't know. I didn't think the FTC's arguments were great.
No, they weren't.
They were 2 questions away from if you die in a video game, do you die in real life?
Quite possibly, but also they today Sony, they announced that Sony and Microsoft did come to an agreement to have Call of Duty on PlayStation for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Which, that basically leaves the CMA as the sole force against this thing.
Yeah.
Which
and I wonder if Microsoft thought this might happen, because Microsoft had that, I forget who it was an executive who said that people essentially use the game streaming as like this side feature while their game downloads. And that's a large portion of the people that use xCloud at the moment, right? So they were saying that under oath, so it wasn't like they were lying or anything like that. But I do wonder if part of their response is the agenda was there that, hey, we need to make it more clear or push the idea that cloud gaming, while a part of the Xbox ecosystem, we don't expect it to be massive in the immediate future. And part of that reasoning was because we think we're going to win this FTC thing, and then the CMA is going to be our next hurdle, and the CMA's, for whatever reason, super worried about cloud gaming, which, hey, you know what? I'm not saying you're crazy to think it could be a future or whatever, but the CMA seemed like dead set that it was going to be the next big thing.
It was the end all be all of gaming.
Yeah. So maybe they did that on purpose. I don't know. I don't think that's like 4D chess out of the realm of possibility for these kinds of things.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, but again, I'm not super surprised by this. At the end of the day, I don't know how cloud gaming is going to shake out. I am not. We're going to get into a story about game preservation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So cloud gaming, I'm not keen on for a few reasons. One of those is preservation. One of those is game ownership. One of those is just quality of games. One of those is how does that affect the development of games and stuff like that. There are a lot of questions to dig into, and I just don't know with cloud gaming at this moment in time.
I'd like to not think about it.
Unfortunately,
Fair.
we may have to. Damn. A few other thoughts. I think so. Xbox is going to win this. Xbox is going to get Activision and all that. But then, what's next? We know Xbox is probably going to make more acquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
But you can make all these acquisitions and everything. But at the in 5 years, if we look back on this, and Xbox is in a similar position they are now, which is Bethesda's making games, Activision Blizzard's making games, but the Xbox Studio games are still here and there, spotty. Like Xbox may be a stronger brand financially, but from a game output standpoint, I think people are going to look back and go, well, that was much to do about nothing.
Right.
Because it didn't solve their immediate problem. Now, people at Xbox may not care because in their mind, their immediate problem is we need money for mobile games. So
yes.
and that's the focus of this. That's one of the major focuses. So I don't know, but I guess from my perspective as somebody who respects the art and craft of video games, I hope that Xbox can kick into gear. Their studios can, and we can figure out what they can figure out what they're going to do with Halo. Perfect Dark can get rolling. Fable, etc., etc., etc. It was interesting today. I noticed. So they announced that Game Pass. They changed Xbox Live Gold.
Right.
It's Game Pass Core now. Right.
Yep.
So essentially, it's similar to like a PlayStation Plus subscription, where you get like a small collection of games, and then Xbox Game Pass is a separate subscription.
Yep.
And then like Game Pass Ultimate, I think is both of them at like $17 a month instead of $20 separately or whatever. Doesn't matter. The thing I'm trying to get to here is their promotional image. Did you guys see the promotional image?
What, of the core? It just
Game
says
Pass Core.
Game Pass and then it has core in the...
Did you see the games behind it though?
Oh, I did not know.
It was
all Activision Blizzard games, maybe?
It was Fallout 4, Senua's Sacrifice, a racing game, and what's the Tim Schafer? Double Fine. Psychonauts, and there was one other game.
Grounded,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the Xbox brand, I don't think of any of those games. Now, technically they are, but I think like Halo, Gears.
Yeah, they're not highlighting those
not
ones.
Up there, right?
Yeah.
Is that reading into things too much? Probably not. I don't know. It's like they don't have a ton to announce for Halo or Gears at the moment, but still, when you're a brand and you're trying to push your big games, and you make this announcement and you push this big image, you're changing the way your subscription works, and like your big stalwart titles are nowhere there. It's just kind of strange.
It is strange, yeah. I think it's more or less taking advantage of the closer acquisitions that they've had.
Oh, that's true.
Than anything else. But it just sucks because Gears is a series that should probably be left alone now. Unless they do something drastically different with the gameplay and storytelling. Halo has so much potential. It always has.
It makes me so sad.
No one knows that more than you, Ty.
Oh my God.
And I think Gears is in the same boat. It's just, as I've said when I was playing Gears War earlier this year, it feels like it's stuck in the mid 2000s. Like the feel of it, the storytelling and all that stuff. Beautiful as it may be, but yeah, no, you're right. they need to have a home run with Starfield.
Yep. And again, Starfield's not even technically like their game, right? They haven't managed Starfield's entire development.
Right.
A big chunk of it maybe, but we also know that their Xbox is hands off. But Starfield's been in development, I'm pretty sure, before Xbox bought ZeniMax, or Microsoft bought ZeniMax. So if Starfield comes out and it's really good, the narrative might be, hey, Xbox finally got a win. But really, that's it's like they bought Starfield a while ago, and then Bethesda executed and got Xbox good press. The bigger wins are going to be if the games that have been developed sort of under the Xbox banner. I don't know if that's how Fable started, but just Fable or Hellblade 2 or Avowed, right? Avowed I'm pretty sure Avowed started development after they purchased Obsidian. So those will be the games that I think really solidify, like, okay, Xbox is here pushing better games now. And again, the reason I think it's important to focus on that is because, again, in 5 years, this deal goes through, they have all this stuff, but in 5 years, if they still haven't figured out their exclusive thing, if they're still not pushing their games, then all they have done is put games that were already established under their umbrella and not solve the problem that they've had for the past decade. Right. And that would be disappointing, especially because, dude, there are nights when I stare up at my ceiling and, Bob Seger, heard a thunder outside, well, it's like I hear a thunder and I just think about how good Halo Infinite could have been, and I sit there and the way he sings about the girl with black hair, I sing about the grappling hook and Cortana. Like it could have been so good. I think, just as an aside, what Halo needs is a big series reboot. I think you take Infinite's structure, open world structure, which was a few ideas away from being absolutely phenomenal, and you just reboot the entire franchise. What they did with Infinite was dumb. Cortana, Halo 5 doesn't make any sense. So you know what? God of War got away with it because they're like, and Kratos traveled to a different realm. Like, okay. So I think what you do is you do a God of War-esque reboot where you sort of revitalize the franchise in that sort of sense. And I think it could be really good, but that's just my own like fan fiction-y type thing. But I think
it works. We have plenty of franchises. We're still stuck on Halo here, but obviously we keep talking about it, but plenty of franchises that have such a rich world to explore, and it never gets explored. Like the end of Halo 3, I think it's Halo 3, like Master Chief crawls in his capsule, he's like, yeah, wake me up later. And it's just, you could have taken him anywhere else to deal with something completely separately, and you could have like branched off a new thing, but you tried to pull strings to tie it back to Earth, and all
Halo
that stuff.
4 wasn't a bad. Halo 4 was
Halo
The
4
Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Halo 4 was like, okay, this is a good, this is a good way to introduce a new thing. And then Halo 5 was The Last Jedi, where it's like, it just said, fuck it, we're doing our own thing. It's like, all right, well, and then guess what? Halo Infinite was straight up The Rise of Skywalker. It was just like a complete mishmash of 16 different ideas. You had people on horses on a Star Destroyer. What the hell's going on? Right? So it's just... I just think they should reboot it. I wanted to hold on. We need to go back and focus on it. I took some notes here. Okay, yeah. The other thing is I wonder what Sony's going to do, because Sony is on its own trajectory right now. They're doing service-based games, which scare me. But if I'm Sony, I think if you stick doing what you're doing and keep doing it well, I think Sony will be fine.
Yeah.
Not that like Sony's gonna collapse or anything, but if they try and like, I don't know, really hammer into games as a service, if they take studios that just sort of got second wins with Sucker Punch with Ghost and Guerrilla Games with Horizon, right? Both of their series that they were working on were sort of fading away, right? Infamous Second Son I think was good, but not like incredible. Obviously, Killzone is like a forgotten thing. Yeah. So both of those franchises were sort of dying away, and they flipped that, and now you have two franchises that are industry heavy hitters now.
Right.
That they've So I think that's what you need to continue doing. I don't think the Naughty Dog's working on a multiplayer game, and it's like okay, but I don't know if that's necessarily the future you want. I will be annoyed if Sony just bitches a lot.
Of course, yeah.
They probably will.
And they probably are already. But like, I think Sony doing what they're doing now is fine, but more sustainably. We talked about this 2 weeks ago too. You don't like find out a way to have your games be just as good and not be as expensive to develop, because one of them's not going to be a hit one day.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's going to be a crisis.
Yeah, Sony has. There's a lot of things to fix. I think first and foremost, they have a first-person shooter problem, and is that they don't have any first-person shooter games to call their own, or third-person really. If we're talking in a not militaristic sense, but so they can go two routes. One, they can go a lot of different routes, but two routes that come to my head is try to get a stranglehold on the Battlefield series. And
that's a good idea.
Vince Zampella is reportedly like taking the reins over Battlefield. And he's the one who created Call of Duty. So, with the help of others, but so what, if Sony can get in bed with EA, that would help.
And that's another game I think that you just need to go back to basics.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely
just make a basic Battlefield, 4 classes, get rid of the sniper. We all know it doesn't help take objectives. We all know you don't need it in a game. This isn't, Red Orchestra or Squad. Get the fuck out of here. Get rid of the snipers. But other than that,
Battlefield 2 HD.
I think that's a phenomenal. Give Richard some kind of sounder. Just
give me a point of inspiration.
A good job sounder.
I'll give you advantage on your next.
I'll use it for a day off.
I'm demanding a sounder. I don't care which one.
Xbox.
There we go. That's fine.
Really that one? The one we use all the time?
Infinite ammo.
There we go. It's PlayStation property. Secondly, and this still deals with first-person shooter. If they want, they can already take the skeleton of what Destiny is and see if they can have Bungie offshoot a multiplayer-only experience for their first-person shooter line, and maybe create a story in the Destiny world where it's not just like Guardians with Ghost. It's like the people outside of the wall.
Okay.
That
Do you know any details about what they're going to do with Marathon?
Oh, it's an extraction shooter. It's all extraction shooters now. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, extraction shooters are. No, you know what? Let me amend that statement. So, extraction shooters are fine. It's annoying that Bungie's making one.
Right.
Because it's like, you're Bungie. Can you not? You guys. Whatever.
And that could be where we're going now. Like, unfortunately, that could just be where we're going.
I don't like it.
I may not be a fan of it either, but I mean, and it's not an extraction shooter, but in my opinion, close enough. Left 4 Dead, like, is still insanely popular, just as much as Payday 2 is, and Payday 3 coming soon. And those are, in a sense, extraction shooters. But anyways, this is just stuff that I had off the top of my head.
Okay. The only other thing I'd say about this acquisition is I do wonder how Phil Spencer, if at all, the question of the mobile thing will come up, because that's Microsoft's big focus here is Candy Crush. And when Phil Spencer goes on, Kind of Funny Xbox Gamecast, questions aren't being thrown at him. Hey, how much is Xbox going to focus on mobile? Because nobody gives a shit about mobile. At least no one listening to this podcast. So, Phil, how are you going to reconcile those two things?
Yeah.
Because, come on. And I think that's an interesting question. We'll see. Phil won't lie about it. Then when people interview him at The Verge. They talk to him about mobile gaming. So that's different. But yeah, I would be interested to see how, and I'm pointing Phil Spencer because Phil Spencer is such a public face of Xbox, and he talks and says stuff all the time. Seems like every few months Phil Spencer says something that we talk about on this show. So if Microsoft really gets a huge corner of the mobile market, how is that going to change Xbox's strategy? How is that going to change Xbox's messaging? How is that going to change the games that are developed? I don't know, but it'll be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see the reaction to that, and then how such a public face like Phil Spencer has to play to the reaction. Anyway.
He'll be fine. Phil Spencer got that dog in him.
Are we ready to move on?
Yep.
80% of classic games.
87%.
87%, excuse me.
Numbers, how do they work?
Percent of classic games are
like magnets.
unplayable? Damn it, who put a question mark in the show notes? I'm just kidding. 87% of classic games are unplayable. This according to a new study done by the Video Game History Foundation and the Software Preservation Network that looked at commercial availability of classic video games. The study looked at 4 samples of 4 ecosystems. I'm going to go through the samples, and then I'm going to give you some definitions. So some words here may not necessarily make sense, but we'll go through.
They will to me.
We'll go through some samples. We'll go through how many of those games are available, and then we'll go into definitions. So one sample they looked at was historical games, which is all games released in the U.S. prior to 2010. So 2009 all the way back to the 60s or whatever. Abandoned, which is an ecosystem with low interest and low activity. Their example was the Commodore 64. Neglected, this is an ecosystem with low interest and high activity. Their example was the Game Boy. And an active ecosystem, this is where there is high interest and high activity. The one they looked at was the PlayStation 2. 13% of historical games before 2010 are in release. 4.5% of Commodore 64 games are in release. 5.8% of Game Boy games are in release. And 12% of PS2 games are in release. Okay, what does in release mean? In release is if a game or a version of the game derived from its original release is reasonably, readily, and legally available from the game's rights holders in either digital or physical edition and on a currently supported or produced game platform. So as an example, Resident Evil 4 would be a game from the PS2 era, correctly?
The historical, correct? Yeah. Or sorry, active.
So that, but Resident Evil, I'm thinking Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 would be PS2, correct?
Yeah, so it's active, yeah.
So, and that would be in release because you can get the original version of Resident Evil 4 on PC. You can
yes, that's correct. Yeah.
That. So there are ways you can play the original version, as opposed to a game like what's a game from the PS2 era you can't find anymore? There's like Japanese horror games or.
Good examples, yeah. Downhill Domination.
There you go. Right, games that you can't find anywhere, and if you do find it, you have to get then a PS2, right? So it's difficult to like find and play a copy, and that would be something that's not in release. Reading from the Video Game History Foundation's website, quote, imagine if the only way to watch Titanic was to find a used VHS tape and maintain your own vintage equipment so that you could still watch it. And what if, my phone messed up, and what if no library, not even the Library of Congress, could do any better? They could keep and digitize that VHS of Titanic, but you'd have to go all the way there to watch it. It sounds crazy, but that's the reality we live in with video games. In $180 billion industry, well, the games and their history disappear. This is where libraries and archives should come in. Anyone should be able to easily explore, research, and play classic video games in the same way that they can read classic novels, listen to classic albums, and watch classic movies. But outdated copyright laws are preventing institutions like ours from doing our jobs, end quote. Okay, so there was a 51-page report. I read through the report. It's very good. It's 51 pages, but there's a lot of citations, so a lot of the pages are like half page.
Oh, yeah.
There's some definitions, so really it's not that long of a read, but it is a really interesting read. I'll let you guys go the initial reactions. Go ahead.
I absolutely love that this information came out, but I hate that the publications that picked it up did not do the shorthand explanation justice.
You don't think so?
Some of them did, some of them didn't, because most of the conversation did not think about what they were trying to say. The Video Game History Foundation is trying to say, and we've already said it, but they're trying to say you cannot buy these legally anywhere. Like they're not in production anymore, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But people, or at least all the responses in the comments, are just like, well, yeah, you can. You just download them and emulate them. And that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, you can download and emulate them, but the average person who just wants to play Mario because they remember it being on their console they grew up and played can't just go to the store and get it. Can't just go to their Switch. Well, they can. I mean, they can, but being facetious here, but they can't just go there and get it. And that's what they're talking about. And I feel that the articles that have been made based off of this aren't really doing a good explanation, but also it's the knee jerk, like people who just read the first line and then go make a response to it. But it is worrying. Absolutely. But there are a lot of, also, not only is it worrying, but there are also a lot of hurdles to go through to improve this number.
And there are,
sucks.
and their study gets into technical limitations. Their study gets into copyright law, and this is just in the United States, let alone games that are only released in Japan or only released in other localities or whatever. That's a whole nother can of worms, I assume. But yeah, they make that distinction in the report. They talk about, okay, one, we're coming at this as researchers. So if you want to research the history of movies, you can watch super old movies. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them all over the place. You can find them on YouTube, right?
Right.
So movies are now, again, the technical aspects of restoring a movie may necessarily be different, maybe easier, I don't know. But the point is, they're more readily available. And that's what, when they're talking about this readily available, that's the distinction that they're making, right? Because yes, Frank Cifaldi and Kelsey Lewin and all the people at the Video Game History Foundation, they know you can download an emulated copy of Splinter Cell Essentials, right?
Yeah.
They understand that, and they can do it themselves quite easily. But the point that they're making is that for the everyday person, it's not as easy. And two, it shouldn't be difficult in the first place, right?
Right.
Is that we need to solve this problem of games being difficult, of things like that being difficult to get. And this shows the magnitude of that problem. It would be one thing if there was 100 games that were difficult to get, but this is a massive number. It's relatively small sample size, but I think even though it's a relatively small sample size, at least I think it is, just considering the history of video games and what we know about the secondhand market and stuff like that, I feel like this is just confirming what everybody already knew. It's just putting a scientifically like researched study to confirm what we already know. But yeah, so I think that's an important thing to understand. And I think the Game Boy is specifically a really interesting case because they got all the games released for the Game Boy almost. They were able to study like all of them. And they talked about how there are like, cause you can play Game Boy games through the Nintendo Switch Online, but it's like there's only a select few.
Very select few.
Why?
Yeah.
Why is this? So companies have the technical ability to do this, but they only do a select few games or whatever, and that's frustrating because there's no reason for that besides like they don't want to spend the money or whatever. And if they don't want to spend the money to upkeep their own stuff, then maybe their stuff shouldn't belong to them. I don't know. Is that a crazy anarchist big government idea? I don't think so.
No, I mean it's the same as is it copyright? But shit, what am I thinking of? What is it after 40 or 50 years something goes
into the public domain.
Public domain.
There's a
Yeah.
bunch of different.
It's 70 years plus the life of the author.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Longer than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
My bad.
Much longer.
But like for hardware specifically, there is a 20-year copyright. So
Oh, really?
Right.
didn't know
So for the NES, or at least what I learned for the NES, for the consoles, I don't know if it's changed when the PS2 came out, but up until at least like the 64, it was 20 years. After 20 years, people could make their own.
And people have,
clone-
aren't there
clone
like
console.
third
Well,
party?
yeah, we
you can't use
do,
the same
yeah.
branding. Yeah, oh
Right,
yeah, that's
yeah,
right. You
yeah.
guys do. Yeah, which still like I think is cool as hell. But you can't call it a Nintendo 64.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Call it like a super video game.
Yeah.
6+4, something different. Yeah, sure. And that makes sense. So there was other things I wanted to get into. First, fuck the ESA. It's always good to remember that the ESA is the lobbying arm that protects loot boxes and Bobby Kotick's stock buybacks. So like, I don't know. It's frustrating. It's frustrating that the history of video games is being guarded by a lobbyist group that is right on the same plane with lobbyist groups that protect like fracking and shit like that.
Yeah,
So,
which
whatever.
is so strange because the when a game is past its cycle, you are no longer making money on that. So why let it rot?
Yeah.
Why let it sit around? I understand Nintendo doesn't want to pay money for licensing, but if they go to Konami and say, hey, let's have, Bonk's Adventure from 1993 to put on our console, would it hurt for Konami to be like, yeah, all right, give us like $1,000, whatever. Who cares about that game?
Yes, there are definitely levels of complex bureaucracy because there's all these rights holders. But are you telling me it's beyond human capability to solve those issues? I'm going to say no. Is it beyond the greed of those corporations to figure it out? That's where it may not be. It may not be. Those corporations may not want to dig, may not want to pull an IP out from their chest that they're never going to use and say, okay, we'll just stick this one out there because they just want to hoard things as much as they want. There are a few things about this. I think one thing that makes this complicated is that games just aren't taken seriously in a lot of ways.
Still.
Yeah, and much in the same way that movies aren't, right? If you go to a film, I don't know, this stuff like this bothers me because if you learn about the history of films, you're going to learn about Birth of a Nation, which is the most racist piece of shit movie ever made. But you have to learn about it because it's a piece of movie history and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when you learn about video game history and you see a footage of like an old game for the N64 and people are like, how is this historically significant? Like, you son of a... If Birth of a Nation is historically significant, a KKK propaganda bullshit movie, then is it really hard to believe that like this game for the Commodore 64 isn't historically significant within the context of video games? Of course it is. Like, make that connection. I think if you just care about creativity, if you care about history, if you care about art, then this sort of thing should be something that you're really passionate about. Because I think it is a solvable systemic problem. Games disappearing. Is it an easy one to solve? No. There was an anecdote in the report that I did not know. You may know this, Richard, and I had no idea. But apparently, at one point in the history of System Shock 2, the rights to System Shock 2 belonged to an insurance company.
I did not know that.
And that's why it wasn't released until a fan started Night Dive Studios.
Right, yeah.
And they bought the rights.
Bought the rights, yeah.
I don't know why it belonged to this insurance company.
Strange.
It may have been the insurance company bought like the company it belonged to and they inherited it or something like that. I don't know. But I was like, holy crap, what? And System Shock 2 is like, again, that's a massive game if you're talking about the history of video games. So to think like a game like that was just under the control of an insurance company doing God knows what, sucks.
Yeah.
And again, that's like, that you would assume that has to be a solvable problem.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is important to point out, and this is something that this study didn't touch on, but again, the study has they're not out here saying, I think I think the Video Game History Foundation, I think Kelsey and Frank were on a first name basis. I think if
Oh yeah, totally.
in their heads, I think they just believe that games should be playable for everybody. They can't necessarily say that because they're arguing within the context of copyright law.
Right.
So they have to present themselves, which they are, as researchers and historians and preservationists. And that gets their foot into the legal door.
Yeah.
Because if you're just coming at this as a hobbyist, you get laughed at because you just want to play these games. Get the hell out of here. But if you're like, no, I'm research, which they really are, they legitimately are, then that's how you get your foot into the copyright law door. That's how you change policy and shit like that. So, but I think in my head, or I think in their heads, they also just think, come on, there's no reason that, every single Commodore 64 game shouldn't be available right now. Right. Come on. So that's the angle that they wrote the story for and what by they, I mean everybody. That's the angle they approached the study from, was academics. The hobbyists are in the back of their head. The academics we're making an academic historian case for this, which I think is important. But the other thing that I think is important, to point out, is even if PlayStation 2s were just all over the place, right? You go into a GameStop and there's just PlayStation 2s on the shelf.
Yep.
And there's PlayStation 2 games. Games age differently than movies do, right?
They do.
You can watch a movie from 1930 right now, and it's fine, right?
Reasonably enjoy it.
And you can, I watch freaking It's a Wonderful Life every year. It's from like 1948. It's great.
Solid film.
If you play a game from 2009 and you boot it up on your PC, you may have to dig into the files and figure out how to reset the resolution. If you play, SOCOM only exists either emulated or in discs. And I have played SOCOM, and it has not aged well. Not because it's not a good game, but because playing a PlayStation 2 running at 15 frames a second, it's just hard to go back to that after 10 years of your eyes adjusting to 30 frames, and then 5 years of your eyes adjusting to the 60 frames and above on a 4K upscaling TV, you know? It's hard to adjust to those things. What? But I think it's correct, right, Connor? I don't think that's a first world problem. I think that's just correct, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because if 11-year-old Tyler was playing in 2002, I wouldn't have a problem with it because that's my only frame of reference, right? But now our frames of reference have accelerated so much that when we go back to play these older games, the things that have made them age are accentuated now.
Yeah.
Right? Because games have become smoother and better. So I think that's a problem that even if all these companies did get together and figure out how to preserve games, that's a problem that is just inherent to video games. But it's compounded by the fact that there's no support for preserving games whatsoever. Sorry, you look like you were gonna.
Yeah, you brought up the point is like if we go way too far past the original point, then I lose it.
What was it about?
That's okay. I can't even remember.
Was it about?
Oh no, I was gonna make a joke about SOCOM.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, because you're like, if you can, get a PS2 and find a copy of SOCOM, and I was gonna be like, there's no not finding that game, buddy. I have like rows of that. SOCOM was. Yes, but and under their definition of readily available, yeah, there's way too many issues to.
Wait, I'm sorry. Go ahead. There's way too many issues to
try to navigate when you're trying to. We love remakes, we love re-releases, but there are way too many issues when it comes to certain things. Anything made by EA is a nightmare because of how much music they license for every single game. One of the most requested games at work is Def Jam Fight for New York. And that game is now almost $200 because first off, the demographics that bought that game did not take care of it. Anytime I see that game come in, it's in terrible condition. There are more people wanting it than even exist. But I tell people, and it's not an impossibility, but that's one of the few games that I will tell you there's a slim chance that they'll ever want to remaster that, because not only do you have to pay for the licensing for all this music, you have to pay for the image likenesses of all those rappers. And of course, developers and stuff like that remade that game or that made that game, and it's a nightmare. It's a literal nightmare. And then people come in and they're like, hey, would they ever make an N64 classic? And I tell them, no, that's a logistical nightmare, because the person they're going to expect 4 controllers for a Nintendo 64. They're going to expect all of these games, and Nintendo can't even, well, they more don't want to, but they can't even keep the wireless 64 controllers for the Switch in stock.
They can't even keep their Joy-Cons.
And their Joy-Cons
can't even
in stock.
fix their Joy-Cons.
Right. So there's just there's so many things to approach when it comes to that stuff.
And that's why you make digital copies of games.
Right. Yeah. No. And
Nintendo's already emulating games. Yeah. Admit it, Nintendo. Mm-hmm. And they're emulating games.
Yeah. And when they do remaster stuff, a lot of times those remasters are digital only, just because it's cheaper to go that route than anything else. And unfortunately, a lot of times they're half-assed too.
Yeah. And that's another thing the story talks about is even in a world where there's lots of digital redistribution, digital storefronts are not a guaranteed thing. They point out that like a big chunk of the Commodore 64's catalog or library is played on a streaming service that I had never heard about. I didn't know it's like AntStream Live.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, there's apparently a huge chunk of Commodore 64 games on there. I never heard of this streaming service before.
AntStream Arcade?
That, yeah. But if AntStream Arcade goes down, all those Commodore 64 games go with it, because there's no physical editions of those games, and there's no digital editions because you're streaming it all. So there's nothing exists except for the photons coming through your TV or monitor.
Commodore 64 is a tricky situation too, because it was a home computer, and most of that stuff in the 80s was sharewared anyways. So it's like people did have like real copies, sure, but man, most of that stuff is just all copied and given to everybody else.
Some things will never be able to be replicated.
Yeah, of course.
Like, I don't know if you can still play the original Ultima Online, but there was so much community development around Ultima Online that the experiences those people experienced can never be replicated, right? Mm-hmm. You can never sort of remake that. So there are things that will always be lost to time. But our discussion here, we're 10 floors up the building, because right now we're on the bottom floor begging people to let's get this going. Let's figure out a way to fix this somehow.
The best thing that happened is how big the story caught fire. Yes. I'm actually very happy with that, because I hope that higher ups at other companies, not the big guys. I'm not talking about like Capcom, Konami, EA, and all of them. I'm talking about some of the lower people who ended up getting these licenses from companies that were like also no name and small. There's Titus in the PS1 N64 era made a ton of games. A lot of them weren't good, but the licenses for some of the games that they made, like when they went under, where did they go?
Yeah.
Thankfully I know that like Hudson Soft, which was like huge back in the day, they went to Konami, like they folded, Konami bought them, and like Atari recently was just bought by another no-name group, I think. I don't even remember who they were bought by, but
it wasn't Embracer, was it?
I wanted to say Embracer, but I don't know. But anyways,
I don't think so.
But yeah, I hope that somebody up in the higher echelons will take this information that has been released seriously, and we'll get more.
And one of the reasons they published the study was because in 2024 I forget how this specifically works, but it's like every year or every few years, there is like a rehashing of U.S. copyright law.
Okay.
Where they update it or something like that.
It's every time Mickey's about to go out.
Yeah, right.
And on their Video Game History podcast, which is a phenomenal podcast that everybody should listen to, a couple years ago, they interviewed one of the people that was like part of the team that was trying to widen the copyright laws to make them a little more accessible and stuff like that, so that games can be played. But the ESA argues against them, because the ESA is on the side of fucking corporations and shit like that, the corpos. So I really dislike the ESA. I think everybody should dislike the ESA, just like we dislike all lobbying firms and shit like that. But yeah, really good story, really good study. I hope that that next year they're able to widen those copyright laws. And this is why I'm somebody that rolls my eyes when we get like, we talk about YouTube copyright strikes or something, because I think fair use is a noble and well-intentioned idea. And I think it's the correct idea, fair use. You should be able to make a YouTube video talking about a director's work and show clips from their movies and monetize that, because you're not stealing their work. Right. If you're just reposting whole scenes, that's one thing. But if you're changing it, if you're commenting on it, right, I feel like you should be able to do that. And that, I don't know. I can't sit here and make the entire fair use argument because it's been made over the course of the past 30 years or whatever. But we don't live in a world where that's honored. We live in a world where theoretically we have fair use, but in practice, you get strong-armed into letting your monetization go. So yeah, when I roll my eyes at copyright law and stuff like that, it's because right now the scales are not balanced. And when you hear stats like this, 87% of games not being playable, it's like, it's not only are the scales not balanced, there's just no freaking scales. Yeah. So are we ready for tidbits?
Yes.
Let's do it. What if I told you in this world there are bits and there are tids, and Richard is the only man who can put them together into tidbits?
Coincidentally, my tidbits today are kind of about preservation as well.
Hey, nice.
So let's get into it. Limited Run Games is reviving a lot of stuff. In my opinion, Limited Run is a bit controversial due to their business practices.
Sure, yeah.
But it turns out there are some really great things that can be done from a company who cares, or at least people who run that company. I know that there are two people now who are there. Oh my God, James Milkey and Jeremy Parrish, who were both, words. And in the early 2000s, they worked for EGM. They were,
okay.
Why do I keep wanting to say publicists?
Is that Electronic Gaming Monthly?
Yes, Electronic Gaming Monthly.
Right.
But they were, oh my God, writers, yes. But journalist, God damn it.
There you go.
Jesus Christ.
I'm here for you. Finish your sentences.
And Jeremy Parrish specifically started Retronauts, and he has been doing that for years, and it's my number one retro game. Anyways, they're reviving a lot of stuff. They announced several games coming to their physical lineup. A lot of games, but I'm just going to highlight these ones. They're as follows. The Gex trilogy. The Gex series was PlayStation games, action adventure. You played a little gecko. Very fun, very dumb. Tomba, which is a very expensive game for the PS1. Tomba 1 and Tomba 2, those are like $60, $70+ games. I mean, that's not that expensive, but Clock Tower, Jurassic Park Classic Games Collection, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, and Shantae.
Plumbers Don't Wear Ties.
Yes, Shantae Advanced Risky Revolution. The Clock Tower release has never come to America. We only got Clock Tower 2 and 3. We never got Clock Tower 1, which was for the Super Famicom, but this one is a Super Famicom version. It's coming to the US, and this version will feature new cutscenes, a new theme song, and a new opening. And that is exciting because that is, of course, preservation, something we can all play now.
Hell yeah. Yep.
This one was the most interesting, though.
Oh, boy.
Shantae Advance is the Shantae sequel game that was in development for Game Boy Advance, but never got finished. It got shelved before they moved on to other projects.
Interesting.
So Limited Run went up to them and asked if they could finish the game.
Whoa, okay.
And it will be finished now and released on an actual Game Boy Advance cartridge.
Oh, wow.
For Limited Run games.
Yeah, and I could understand that there's the controversial thing, is you're releasing a Game Boy Advance cartridge. So on the one hand, it's like you're reviving a game.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's a Game Boy Advance cartridge. Like it feels like a monkey's paw type situation.
Yeah,
you know?
no, I think they'll release an actual. I think they'll release
like
a digital. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. They just haven't announced it.
It's
Okay.
the novel for the Game Boy because it was supposed to be released on the Game Boy Advance.
Okay, well, because I know Digital Run does a lot of physical stuff and special editions. And
Yeah,
things like that,
the problem is their physical stuff is like we're only making like 500 copies,
and that's not preservation.
and then the 500 copies get swiped up and sold for
Scalped and blah,
hundreds
blah,
of
blah, blah,
more.
Yeah.
So if you're not there, right at the start, you're never going to get it. So it sucks.
Yeah.
That was that tidbit. The next tidbit is also quite exciting. But Digital Eclipse is now becoming the Criterion Collection for video games, which is very exciting. Over the weekend, Digital Eclipse announced one game, The Making of Karateka. And the Karateka was released on the Apple II back in the 80s. It was the first game from the creator of Prince of Persia series, Jordan Mechner. It has been ported to plenty of consoles. It's been on the Atari 7800 and the 2600, I think. But this will be the first time on modern consoles. And The Making of Karateka is the story of one single game using video features, Jordan's original design documents, and the contents of his floppy disks from the development of the game and more.
Oh, man. So awesome.
So it's literally the single game, but it's just the entire history of that game that they could find for this particular title. I never played it. I've seen it before, but I've never played it. So it's quite important, but I'd had no idea how or why. But along with this, Digital Eclipse has also announced the Gold Master series, which is a new independently produced and self-published line of releases that highlight the most legendary games, developers, and stories from gaming history.
In Digital Eclipse, with all their releases, they always do like educational / background type stuff.
They hadn't always, but when
our boy
Frank
Cifaldi.
Cifaldi was working for them, that's when that started.
Yes.
And then the person who took over his reins is another journalist who I very much admire and follow, Chris Kohler.
Chris Kohler, yeah. He used to work with Kotaku.
Yes.
And a bunch of other sites.
Well, EGM, along with Jeremy Parrish.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. And
cool.
then he was Wired.com and whatnot. But
okay.
yeah, and those are those two tidbits that I got. There was more, but I didn't want to they highlighted the differences between the CEOs' payments of all the game companies. And of course, what's his name is towards the top, Kotick, with like 150 million. You know how much the president of Nintendo makes?
Is it like 2 million?
It's like 3.2 million. Yeah, compared to like 100.
Probably still too much, but I don't know how what the cost of living is like in Japan. I'm not going to.
I mean, I know it's not that high, but also, I mean, you don't need $148 million.
You don't. You really. What are you buying with that? What are you buying? What you just if you gave me $148 million, it would take me 10 minutes to buy what I would need, and I'd have probably $147.5 million left. Like, other than that, I would get. Why am I fantasizing about this? Richard, do you have NPD numbers?
I do have NPD numbers.
Hey,
we don't
these
have
are a couple weeks old, so
they are actually. Next week, I might gather up the next ones.
So give us some highlights right quick. Do whatever you want to do.
Let's see here. This is from Circana. They're not NPDs
they're not
anymore.
NPD numbers anymore. Yeah.
Sorry, but they're from Circana. But let's see here. Consumer spending on video game content, hardware, accessories totaled at $4.1 billion.
And this is for June.
This is for May.
May. Okay.
A 12% increase when compared to a year ago. Year-to-date consumer spending was flat when compared to the same period last year.
Interesting. Okay.
$21.8 billion. Spending on video game content grew 9% in May when compared to a year ago. Add-on content spending increased 58% when compared to May of 2022, offsetting declines across mobile and PC. New physical video game hardware or software spending reached its highest May total since May of 2014.
New physical game software.
Yeah.
So that means
people are buying physical stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, interesting. Alrighty, cool.
Tears of the Kingdom was best-selling game May 2023.
Not surprising.
Breath of the Wild came back into the charts at 13th place after finishing at 28 the month before. Video game hardware spending increased 56% versus year-over average to $338 million. Switch was the highest best-selling platform. PS5 continues to lead in units and dollars. Accessory spending during May increased 14% when compared to a year ago, reaching 159 million. The PS5 DualSense remains the best-selling accessory. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom Series 1 Amiibo character pack led May's accessories and unit sales.
Yeah, well, not surprising there. And a lot of people that are buying the game are buying up the amiibos too, I imagine.
I just have them on my Switch already. I'm on my Switch already.
You're not allowed to talk about that.
Do what I want. Come get me, Nintendo. Please don't.
What's that red light on your forehead?
Wow. I can't do the jumping sound. But anyways, that's it. That's it for Tidbit.
Awesome. Okay.
Tidbits and Circana numbers.
Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse. Gaming Discourse FM, new episode Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesday will be
Wednesday.
This Wednesday.
Patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.